If the New Orleans Saints decide to wait to address running back in the NFL draft, Arkansas's Mike Washington could be a perfect steal.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I am your host, your friend, Ross Jackson. Today's episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Head over to FanDuel.com today to check out their college basketball parlay profit boost. On today's episode of Locked On Saints, we're taking a look at some of the combine participants that actually raised their stock in Indianapolis. We'll take a look at a rare cornerback that could be a can't-miss prospect late. We'll also take a look at a sleeper linebacker who helped himself out big time at Lucas Oil Stadium. But we're going to kick everything off with a running back that the New Orleans Saints could wait to grab if they want to address the position in the NFL draft and would probably walk away pretty happy. And that's Mike Washington Jr., the running back out of Arkansas. We're going to hit 6 different prospects on today's episode. We got all of that and a little bit of lanyap, so let's get into it. New Orleans Saints could indeed go with Jeremiyah Love in the first round if he's there at number 8. But there seems to be a consensus that he won't make it to number 8, which is absolutely a possibility. But if that happens and the Saints still feel like they want to address running back in the NFL draft, one player that really raised his stock and brought himself some more attention during his time at the Combine was Mike Washington, the Arkansas running back. Already a pretty talented player, was a guy that we mocked a few times here on the show. We've talked about a lot on the show. 6'1", 223 pounds, coming out of Arkansas, Woo Pig Suey, 4.33 40-yard dash, 39-inch vertical leap, 10-foot 8-inch broad jump. And let me tell you one more time, 6'1", 223 pounds when he measured in at the Combine and hit all of those numbers. He carried the football 167 times last year, amassed 1,070 rushing yards, and then rushed for 8 touchdowns. On top of that, he also brought in 28 receptions for 226 receiving yards and a touchdown. So you got speed, you got burst, you have explosiveness, you have the ability to be able to run the football, but also catch the football out of the backfield. Mike Washington is a pretty good prospect that could be found in day 2 or early day 3 of the NFL draft. I don't think that he falls much further than that, but really, who knows, right? We thought Devin Neal last year was going to be a day 2 guy, and he ended up not going off the board until the Saints took him at round 6 in a move that the Saints absolutely felt like was a massive win for them, being able to get him at that point in the draft. I agree. But we're talking about a running back here that has a lot of really, really good qualities beyond just the size and the speed, which, look, we talk about height, weight, speed products all the time when it comes to pass catchers, right? Those guys that are tall, that have good weight distribution, and that move well or are fast. We talk about that all the time when it comes to the pass catchers. But as a rusher, being a size and speed prospect like Mike Washington, that's really desirable at the NFL level. Like, this is a dude that has the ability to be able to run through perimeter defenders, but also be able to get around the guys in the trenches, to where he's 223 pounds, but he's not exclusively a between the tackles runner. He has the speed and he's able to take the angles to get around to the outside as well. And he can win there both with his physicality. He's got those long arms as well that allow him to be able to put some stiff arms down. He's got some great ones on tape, but he also has the speed to be able to outrun guys and even beat them to the corner himself. Another really positive trait about him is that he consistently falls forward. And at 6'1", you have the ability to fall forward and pick up a few yards just by falling down, pick up a pair of yards that way. That's a positive quality. It was something that we really liked watching Devin Neal's tape last year as well. And so another guy that always has that ability to fall forward, that can win in multiple ways, and that is absolutely a guy that is an inside-outside winner. He can run between the tackles because of the bulk, because of the mass that he has there, but also has the vision to be able to see, identify, and hit holes that are being opened by the offensive line. Has the speed and ability to get around the edge, like we talked about. So if the Saints are able to go into free agency and help out their offensive line, particularly from a run game perspective, which is where they need the most help, particularly on the interior. And of course, they need a new starting left guard. They don't have a starting left guard on the roster presently as we speak. So if they can go into free agency and do that, maybe bring in a free agent running back that can help them out. Not a high level signing, but a mid to lower level in terms of contract and in terms of expense signing. And then go into the draft. And then if Jeremiyah Love isn't there at 8, or if they go a different direction at 8, both of which are entirely possible, they could look to a guy like Mike Washington, along with several other talented young running backs that are going to be available in this draft class beyond round 1. So absolutely Mike Washington, a name to know and a name to keep an eye on who helped himself big time with his outstanding performance at the NFL Combine. Another player that helped himself out a lot from more of a confirmation perspective was Indiana wide receiver Omar Cooper Jr. Omar Cooper Jr. is officially above Elijah Surratt for me. And if you have been an everydayer and you've been here all throughout the 2025 season, you know how high I was on Elijah Surratt. And I'm being honest, I'm still pretty high. But him not running, him not participating in the combine, that's something that maybe raises some question marks, right? Like running, is there a concern about what the time was going to be there? What's the purpose of not, whatever it might be, right? So he clocked in, or he measured at 6'2.5", 210, 212 pounds, but that's all that he did. Omar Cooper, on the other hand, measured in at 6 foot, 199 pounds, ran a 4.4 240, and then had a 37-inch vert as well, showing you the explosiveness, showing you the leaping ability, and showing you the speed that's absolutely there on tape during that national championship run with the Hoosiers. Last year with the Hoosiers, caught 69 passes, 937 receiving yards, 13 receiving touchdowns. So saw a lot of production and really generated a lot of production for that Hoosiers offense. He's slot versatile, but he's not one note. You could place him on the outside. You can move him around in the formation. Would be a very good slot corner and slot specialist in the NFL, but not pigeonholed there. You can move him around and do some extra things with him. Very helpful when you can do something like that. And he's a good separator, especially with that speed, understands how to utilize leverage, use deceleration and acceleration to create some separation. Very, very talented player. Another player to watch out for could be a day 2 guy. And if the Saints don't go wide receiver in the first round, but feel really good about an Omar Cooper in the second round, could be a really, really good addition if they don't want to go, or if they don't go that way in the first round. So really a couple talented offensive players that could be some difference makers and bring some production to this New Orleans Saints offense. Coming up next, I want to take a look over on the defensive side with one defender that absolutely raised his stock in Indianapolis. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's tax time, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes is a lot. Trying to book an appointment, that's not the most convenient. Sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth and wondering if they really get your situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade. Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications and go on about your day. It's a relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing that your taxes will be handled right. Head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment today. All right, family. TCU's Kaleb Elarms-Orr was one of the bigger risers at the NFL Combine and somebody that should be on the radar of the New Orleans Saints. We appreciate you very much, as always, for making us your first listen and being an everydayer here on the show. Hey, free agency is right around the corner. It's here, and so are we. So get 1 month free of our Everydayer Club with code FREEAGENCY, one word, all caps, now through March 15th. It'll let you go ad-free on the show and keep this conversation going over on our Discord channel as well. So join the club today by heading over to lockedonsaints.supercast.com or clicking the link in the description. Kaleb Elarms-Orr was already one of my favorite linebackers going into this class, but man, that combine performance really kind of put him over the top. Pretty solid build, 6'2", 234 pounds. 234 pounds is maybe a little bit lighter, but if he could bulk up a little bit at the next level, that could certainly help. But 6'2" is pretty decent, right? 6'3", 6'4" is like me personally. That's what I think of when I think linebacker. But that doesn't mean you have to be 6'3" or 6'4" to be a good linebacker. Look at what Isaiah Stallbird was able to do as a third down pass rush specialist from the linebacker position just last year. And he's like 6'1", 215. Like, that dude is incredibly talented. And so a guy like Kaleb Elarms-Orr could have a pretty similar trajectory as an Isaiah Stallbird in the New Orleans Saints defense. 4.47 40-yard dash, 40-inch vertical, and a 10-foot 4-inch broad jump absolutely put him up in the lights and in the spotlight for a lot of folks that were watching. His on-field drills were really impressive to watch. I'd say the same thing about Mike Washington as well. He totaled over at TCU last year with the Horned Frogs 130 tackles, 11 of which were tackles for a loss. He had 4 sacks as well as 2 passes defended. So he's somebody that was dropping back in coverage, that was rushing the passer, and clearly was very active in the run game as well. 130 tackles, and a lot of those tackles near the line of scrimmage. So he was getting down and making some plays, fitting the run, and making some really, really good moments for himself on tape, which he then was able to follow up with this athletic testing. Now the athletic testing is really impressive. You go back to the tape and then you see all that impressive stuff on tape, and then you go, this is a player that could make some sense. So this is probably a guy that was late day 3, could potentially now rise up to early day 3, maybe even day 2 if somebody really likes him. He's got sideline to sideline ability, which, as we know, is kind of priceless amongst linebackers and second level players. He's really, really good with his reaction time, a click and close, read and react type. There's not a lot of delay between him reading play flow and then triggering to get down to try to make a play, things like that. Sometimes he'll over pursue some stuff, find himself a little bit out of position, but the mental processing is absolutely there. And then his open field tackling is actually pretty impressive. Now, he doesn't always finish those tackles, right? It's tough to do that in open field, and especially in a field like college football's, but he always finds himself in the right position, always sort of seems to be matching the momentum of the ball carrier pretty well, and oftentimes does find a way to make that tackle as well. So you're thinking about this guy as a guy that can not only be somebody that could potentially be a depth piece over on your defensive side that could grow into more, but with the open field tackling, with the downhill nature, with the triggering, with the click and close ability, with the ability to react upon what he's reading, makes him a really core special teamer as well. So if you can get him in day 3, a really good special team swing for you there. The other thing that I'll mention is that he's a fantastic blitzer. And that was like the Isaiah Stallbird comparison kept popping up as I was watching him, was because of how effective he was as a blitzer, because of his speed and because of the agility. He has really good body control, is able to get around edges, things like that. So really, really impressive player that I think is one of the bigger combine risers, along with like the Jalen Kilgores and the Sonny Styles and the Lorenzo Styles, like some of the obvious guys. I'm trying to highlight some of the less talked about players on today's show. So Sonny Styles helped himself out quite a bit when it came to linebacker position, but we're talking about a first round guy that took himself from being a first round guy to being a first round guy. You know what I mean? These are guys that really elevated themselves in terms of, late round draft picks, pushing themselves up. Some guys that maybe it could have gone undrafted, pushing themselves up into day 3, like we're hitting those types of players right now. But Kaleb Elarms-Orr, one of my favorite players in this year's draft to watch, and that continued with his combine performance. Another guy that we've talked about quite a bit, wide receiver out of Tennessee, Chris Brazzell Jr. They just don't make them like this very often. And there's like 3 players that kind of fit this mold all of a sudden in this draft class. And Brazzell's one of them, right? 6'4", 198 pounds, 4.37 40-yard dash. At 6'4" and 198 pounds with a pretty solid catch radius to boot. On top of all that, had 62 receptions for 1,017 receiving yards last year and 9 receiving touchdowns, which I believe either tied or was the lead in the SEC for an individual player in receiving touchdowns as well. So Brazzell joins like Ted Hurst out of Georgia State, who ran in the 4.4s and is also like 6'3", 6'4". Bryce Lance out of North Dakota State University, who ran a 4.34 and measured in at about 6'4" as well. He kind of joins this unique, unicornish type of receiving trio or group in this wide receiver class that has this height, weight, speed thing really, really down to a science in terms of how good these players are, how tall they are, how fast they are. Like having all these guys that are 6'4" and running in the 4.3, 4.4 range is really, really outstanding. Remember, a lot of the best wide receivers in the NFL run 4.5. So being a 4.3 guy does not guarantee you success in the NFL. But one of the things that typically is a good formula for success in the NFL, whether it's from an individual kind of specified role standpoint or a more all-around playmaker standpoint, is that combination of height, weight, speed. And Brazzell is one of these guys. And I would consider him most uniquely this sort of big-bodied vertical receiving threat, because that is where he creates his best separation because of that speed that he has, is when he's pushing downfield. And so the Saints have Chris Olave, who can be their downfield threat, but they don't really have that other downfield threat that's a proven commodity right now, right? Devon Vele can get downfield. He is a fluid mover. He is a solid route runner. He is a height, weight, speed guy, but he's so valuable in the middle of the field that there's a big point to where it's just like, no, go ask him to do that thing and find another guy to be the other field stretcher, right? And a guy like Brazzell, who stands at 6'4" and has the ability to be a field stretcher for you, it's a really unique blend of talent that probably rose his, maybe not necessarily his draft stock, but certainly rose his profile quite a bit in Indianapolis during the combine. All right, speaking of height, weight, and speed prospects, the other place where that matters a lot and gets a lot of attention is at cornerback. And that's why Washington cornerback Tacario Davis might not necessarily be at a position of need for the New Orleans Saints, but also could be a talent too good to pass up after a certain point in the draft. And he proved that at the Combine this year. Let's get to that next as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends over at Indeed. With workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inboxes overflowing as you're returning from that Mardi Gras season, you know that sometimes there could be those situations where that little hire that you needed to get right, the one that you really needed to get right, is still left unfilled. Well, don't worry, that's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Indeed sponsored jobs helps you reach the people that are going to end up actually being what it is that you're looking for, whether that's from the skills, experience, even just the location that you're looking for, so that you're not just kind of hoping that your ideal candidate stumbles upon your job posting at another website. In the minute that I'm going to sit here telling you about Indeed, companies just like yours will have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed's data worldwide. So make sure you go and check out Indeed sponsored jobs today. You can find out more and claim your $75 Indeed sponsored job credit by heading over to Indeed.com/podcast. That's Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? That's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Today's episode also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And look, college basketball is already exciting, but you know things are about to heat up as we cross the calendar here into March. There's going to be so much you're not going to want to miss out on. Big games, tight spreads, momentum, and the way that it shifts every single night. And now you can take all that energy and you can turn it into some massive potential winnings over at FanDuel.com today, thanks to their college basketball parlay profit boost. You won't want to miss this. You can take mixed spreads and totals and player props all together and then see how that slate plays out. And you could walk away with some big time winnings. And you could even use that profit boost, right? The college basketball parlay profit boost I was telling you about to bump up that potential payout today. And then you can get into other stuff too. The LSU women plus 1,800 right now for the national championship. Head over to FanDuel.com today to get started. That's FanDuel.com. FanDuel, play your game. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Tacario Davis is a cornerback that you should know out of Washington who absolutely helped himself during his time in Indianapolis. We're continuing on with the players that rose their profile through a Saints lens. And while Tacario Davis plays a position that the Saints might not necessarily consider a need at outside corner, his talent, after a certain point, might just be too good to pass up. Once again, we thank you very much for making us your first listen and being an everydayer here. Don't forget that promo code, free agency, all one word, all caps, over at LockedOnSaints.supercast.com so you can join our Everydayer Club. You can join one level, $5 a month with a free month with free agency, that promo code, to get ad-free access to our Discord, or $15 a month to get all the extra content, one-on-one texting with me, Q&As, film studies, all that. Also can get a free month on that too. So don't forget that promo code free agency over at lockedonsaints.supercast.com or click the link in the description. Tacario Davis, cornerback out of Washington, measured in at 6'4" and like 184, 194 pounds. Pretty solid for any corner looking for an NFL career. Already a great start. However, it gets better. We talked about height, weight, speed from the wide receiver perspective. We talk about size, speed from the running back perspective. But height, weight, speed matters when it comes to these corners as well. So 6'4", 194 pounds, 4.41 40-yard dash. So he matched, actually, who? Well, he's actually like 100th of a second faster than Omar Cooper Jr. So comes in at 4.41. 37-inch vert. So add 6'4", 37-inch vertical with a 10-foot 3-inch broad jump. The explosiveness is absolutely there. So you're already 6'4", and you can jump 37 inches in the air. As a 5'10" king, I gotta say, not fair. Not fair at all. 10 tackles last year, 1 tackle for a loss, 2 interceptions, 3 passes defense. Missed some time with injury over the course of his collegiate career. One of the reasons why somebody with this level of size and athleticism and has this physical and athletic profile isn't like a first round conversation, doesn't have the production, and of course has the injury kind of history a little bit, right? So he's missed some time and everything. But outside of that, like if this is a player that's available day 2, day 3, at a point to where you're just looking for like best player available and you're looking for, all right, who's got the traits that you can build off of, a guy like Tacario Davis could be hard to pass up. Like if you have Kool-Aid McKinstry on one side and you have Quincy Riley on the other side, that's really strong when it comes to your starters. But the Saints still have to rebuild and continue to build their cornerback depth over time. And they could still lose Alontae Taylor in free agency and go into the draft without being able to address that in free agency. Now, they might be able to address that with somebody in-house, Jonas Sanker, Isaiah Stallberg, Quincy Riley, Beanie Bishop, as we talked about before. But they could also go into the draft hoping that Keontae Scott's there in the second round, but what if he's not? Then all of a sudden, maybe you're looking at, okay, what if you moved Quincy Riley inside and then you drafted for the outside corner? And that's where a guy like Tacario Davis could be pretty interesting. Good ball skills. Hard not to when you're that tall and can jump that high, but got to still make the plays. Does a good job of making the plays. Great reach. Not only can he jump 37 inches in the air, not only is he 6'4", but he's got 33 3/8 inch arms as well. So he's got a great wingspan to go with the leaping ability and the physical profile, and also has some really nice instincts as well. Does a very good job of kind of reading, knowing, having an idea of where things are going and reacting to that. In situations where he got picked on and everything, like he was the type of dude that always, if you went at him once and you won, if you went at him again, you never really won the second time. He and Ephesians Prysock, the other starter over there in Washington, were excellent when it came to that kind of mentality level of play. So Tacario Davis, definitely a player to watch. And another player that I think really helped themselves and raised their profile. We talked about him after night 1 of the combine. I wanted to make sure we came back to him at some point. This seemed like a good opportunity. But how about 6'5", 313-pound Clemson defensive tackle DeMonte Capehart, who destroyed the combine from the defensive tackle perspective. Ran in the 4.8s in terms of his 40, 33.5-inch vertical leap. That's only 3.5 inches shy of Tacario Davis's 40 vertical that we were just like freaking out about. 33.5 inches at 313 pounds. That's awesome. And an 8'11" broad jump, which is solid as well. So you've got good speed, right? You got good explosiveness on the defensive line. This is a guy that played a little bit of A gap, lining up right over the center, but also played a little bit of B gap, lining up in between the center and the guard. Excuse me, I'm such a dummy. Between the guard and the tackle. And so he kind of moved around a whole bunch of different places. Played, though, I think it was like 20-something% of his time in the A gap, and there was like 70-something% over at the B gap with a little bit of end work. throughout all of it. But he's also got long arms. So he's got this great size, got this great athletic profile as well. But then has this 33 7/8 of an inch arm length to go with it. So if he's somebody that gets his hands on you and then extends those arms a little bit, he's going to create some separation. That's what allows him to be so disruptive. And it allows him to kind of be the space eater as well. He just eats up double teams. And a big part of the reason why he eats up double teams is because he's got someone is taped where he's just got his hand on one dude, holding him off, and then he's rushing into the other guy that's directly in front of him, right? Utilizing that reach and utilizing the leverage and power that he has in that base. And he's a mad good people mover. I mean, he walks guys back, moves guys around, all that. Usually we talk about people movers being the offensive lineman. Capehart's a defensive lineman and did a lot of people moving from that side of the equation. So this is another guy that is at a position that maybe isn't considered a big time need, but I think defensive tackle and interior defensive line is worth addressing for New Orleans throughout this offseason. You have Bryan Bresee, you could bring Nathan Shepard back. You have some pieces there on the interior of the defensive line, but you can also add more. And you don't strictly have to add the A-gap nose tackle 3-4 nose guard type. You can also go and add those 3-4 defensive end pass rusher types and guys that can do a little bit of both. That's what's so fun about a guy like DeMonte Capehart. All right, family, time for a little bit of lanyap for the real ones that made it to this point in the episode. Obviously, those are 6 really, really strong prospects, but there are some of the other guys that really raised their profile closer to the top of the draft as well. Sonny Styles was somebody that we talked about a lot. The Ohio State linebacker helped himself, I think, quite a bit. There's a little bit of this discrepancy right now for the other Ohio State guy that ran this weekend, and this past weekend, that was wide receiver Carnell Tate, who ran like a 4.52, which is really good. And again, like Michael Thomas ran in the 4.5s, Devontae Adams ran in the 4.5s. Justin Jefferson was only 4.48, and the difference between 4.48 and 4.52 on a football field is completely negligible. And so in terms of like the game itself. And so it's interesting kind of like watching how these things like tell this whole story and all that. So it'll be interesting to see how NFL teams actually react to all this. I can't wait for this draft. There is a lot of really interesting stuff in this one, but I just didn't want to go, like I kind of mentioned Sonny Styles earlier, Lorenzo Styles, who might have taken himself from undrafted to drafted. There are these players that absolutely helped themselves big time that I just didn't want to like go the entire episode without showing them some love, because obviously there are players that, could have, Monroe Freeling, right? The offensive lineman who was the guy that was expected to be a first rounder, as far as I knew, at least, as far as I thought, but then got to now being in like top 10, top 8 conversation, which is fantastic news for the New Orleans Saints, by the way. Like, it's like if Fernando Mendoza and 2 offensive linemen, let's say Francis Mawinoa and Monroe Freeling, go off the board, that's great news for New Orleans before they're on the board at 8. So like these players that sometimes raise their draft stock within the first round might not necessarily be relevant to the Saints, but they could, Sonny Styles is, but they could end up also having a major impact and ripple effect that goes positively for the Saints by the time that they're on the board, or on the clock rather, at 8. All right, family, coming up later on today, we're starting our free agency primers. We'll go through the in-house free agents that could remain and those that could be on the way out. We got all that coming up for you later on today. We appreciate you very much, as always, making us a party day part of your routine, for saying yes to me on the show. If you see me, please say hi. And if you need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how your mom and them. You trusted that nation. I'll holla at you.